There comes a moment in life when you realize that waiting for people to walk beside you is keeping you from becoming the person you were meant to be. Maybe you felt it. You've looked around and noticed that the people you expected to support you have become distant. The encouragement you once hoped for never came. The calls became fewer. The invitations stopped. And somewhere along the way, you started wondering whether something was wrong with you. But what if this season of walking alone isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? Welcome back to Focus with Maya. Today, we're talking about something many people resist because it can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. Learning to walk alone while you build yourself into someone you can trust, respect, and become proud of. There is a difference between being lonely and being alone. Loneliness says, nobody is here for me. Solitude can say, I am finally learning how to be here for myself. That distinction can change your life. Because sometimes you don't need another person to rescue you from your uncertainty. You need enough quiet to hear your own thoughts. You need enough distance from outside opinions to discover what you actually want. You need enough courage to keep moving when nobody is clapping for you. Think about how often you've delayed something because you were waiting for company. You wanted to start, but nobody joined you. You wanted to change, but someone questioned you. You wanted to grow, but the people around you were comfortable with the version of you that no longer fit. And slowly, without noticing, you began negotiating with your own potential. Not anymore. There is a version of you that can only be built when you stop asking everyone else for permission to become stronger. And before we finish this message, we're going to uncover why some of the quietest seasons of your life may actually be building the strongest person you've ever known. Walking alone teaches you something that applause never can: how to keep your word to yourself. When nobody is watching, will you still do what you said you would do? That question reaches deeper than motivation. Because motivation can rise and fall with your emotions, but discipline asks you to make a decision and honor it even when the feeling disappears. Maybe you've promised yourself before that you'd change, you'd wake up earlier, take better care of yourself. Stop chasing people who don't value you, learn something new. Leave behind a habit that keeps pulling you backward. And then life got difficult. You became tired, you became discouraged. You started telling yourself, I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow quietly became next week. Next week became another month. And eventually you began doubting whether you were capable of changing at all. But your problem may not be a lack of ability. You may simply have spent too much time waiting to feel ready. Real growth often begins on an ordinary morning when nobody is cheering for you. You get out of bed even though your mind gives you 10 reasons not to. You do the work when the excitement is gone. You choose the healthier response when the old reaction would be easier. Those moments seem small. They aren't. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. You begin to believe your own word again, and that changes confidence. Confidence isn't always the loud voice saying, I know I can do this. Sometimes it's the quiet certainty that says, even if I struggle, I won't abandon myself. That is why walking alone can become such a powerful teacher. You discover that you don't need constant attention to remain committed. You don't need an audience to make your effort meaningful. You don't need everyone to understand what you're building. Some things grow best in silence. So if your life feels quieter than it used to, don't rush to fill the silence. Listen to what it's asking you to become. Because the person you're becoming may require habits that the person you used to be never had. One of the hardest parts of walking alone is learning to stop measuring your life against somebody else's timeline. You see someone buying a home while you're still trying to get your finances together. Someone seems to have the relationship you wanted. Someone else is building a career, traveling, succeeding, becoming visible. And suddenly your own progress feels small. You start asking questions that quietly wound you. Why am I behind? What's wrong with me? How did everyone else figure this out? But comparison has a cruel habit of showing you someone else's chapter and convincing you that it tells the whole story. You don't know what they sacrificed. You don't know what they fear. You don't know what happens when they close the door at night and become alone with their thoughts. And more importantly, their life isn't your assignment. Your growth has its own timing. Think about a seed underground. For a long time, nothing appears to be happening. From the surface, it looks forgotten, but beneath the soil, roots are forming. Strength is developing where nobody can see it. Your life can have seasons like that too. There may be months when your progress isn't obvious. You're learning, recovering, practicing, saving, thinking, rebuilding your confidence after disappointment. Don't mistake invisibility for failure. Some of the most important changes in your life will happen before anyone notices them. You may become calmer before people notice you're no longer reacting to everything. You may become wiser before anyone realizes you stopped explaining yourself. You may become stronger before anyone understands why you no longer accept what you once tolerated. That is growth. And sometimes the greatest evidence that you've changed isn't what you've gained. It's what no longer has the power to control you. The person who once needed everyone's approval may eventually discover something liberating. Peace is more valuable than being understood by everyone. So stop asking whether you're moving as quickly as someone else. Ask something more honest. Am I becoming more faithful to the life I know I should live? If the answer is yes, keep walking. Even slowly, even quietly, even alone. Because a life built according to someone else's timeline will never feel completely like your own. And there is another kind of freedom waiting for you when you stop trying to convince people that your path is worth taking. Sometimes walking alone becomes necessary, because not everyone who loves you knows how to support the person you're becoming. That's a difficult truth. We often assume that if someone cares about us, they'll automatically understand our growth. But human beings don't always respond to change with encouragement. Sometimes your growth makes people uncomfortable because it changes the relationship they've become accustomed to. Maybe you were always the one who said yes, the one who answered every call, the one who apologized first, the one who tolerated disrespect because keeping the peace felt easier than confronting the truth. Then one day you begin saying no. You stop explaining every decision. You stop running after people who repeatedly walk away. You start protecting your time. And suddenly someone says you've changed. Maybe they're right, but change isn't always betrayal. Sometimes change is what happens when you finally stop betraying yourself. There is a psychological reason this can feel so uncomfortable. Human beings become attached to familiar patterns, even unhealthy ones. When you change your behavior, the people around you may unconsciously expect you to return to your old role. That's why boundaries can create tension, not because they're wrong, but because they interrupt an arrangement that was convenient for someone else. You don't have to become cruel. You don't have to punish anyone. You don't have to turn your heart into stone. You can remain kind while becoming harder to manipulate. You can forgive someone without giving them unlimited access to you. You can love people and still choose distance. You can wish someone well without following them into a life that costs you your peace. That's emotional maturity. And perhaps you've been afraid that choosing yourself would make you selfish. But there is a difference between selfishness and self-respect. Selfishness says, only I matter. Self-respect says, I matter too. That small word matters too. Your needs matter too. Your peace matters too. Your future matters too. Your energy matters too. If you're choosing yourself again, write one word in the comments that represents what that decision means to you. Then remember this, you don't need to announce every boundary. Some of the strongest boundaries are simply lived. And when you begin living differently, you may discover something surprising about the people who remain beside you. There is a kind of strength that nobody sees because it happens inside your own mind. It happens when you disappoint yourself and decide not to hate yourself for it. It happens when you make a mistake, sit with the consequences, and choose to learn instead of spending another year punishing yourself. Many people think self-discipline means being hard on yourself. It doesn't. Real discipline requires honesty, but it also requires compassion. Imagine someone you love came to you carrying the same regrets you carry. They told you about the opportunities they wasted, the people they trusted, the choices they wish they could undo. Would you look at them and say, you ruined everything, you're hopeless? Probably not. You'd tell them they made mistakes. You'd tell them they still had time. You'd remind them that one chapter doesn't define an entire life. So why do you speak to yourself with a cruelty you would never use towards someone you love? Walking alone gives you the opportunity to change that inner conversation. You begin noticing the voice inside your head, the one that says you're too late, too damaged, too ordinary, too far behind. And instead of automatically believing it, you pause. You ask, is this actually true, or is this simply the fear talking? That pause is powerful because thoughts are not always facts. A painful experience can teach your mind to expect more pain. After betrayal, you may begin expecting betrayal everywhere. After failure, you may interpret every new challenge as evidence that you'll fail again. But your past is information, not a life sentence. You can learn from what happened without allowing it to decide what happens next. That's where rebuilding yourself becomes deeper than changing your circumstances. You're rebuilding the way you speak to yourself. You're rebuilding your ability to recover after disappointment. You're rebuilding trust in your own judgment. And slowly, something beautiful happens. You stop needing perfection before you allow yourself to feel proud. You start recognizing small victories. You got through the difficult morning. You made the difficult call. You walked away instead of reacting. You returned to the work after falling behind. Nobody applauded, but you noticed, and sometimes that is where real confidence begins. Not with everyone believing in you, with you finally becoming someone who believes your own life is worth the effort. There will be days when walking alone doesn't feel noble. It will simply feel lonely, and you shouldn't have to pretend otherwise. Some nights you may put your phone down after scrolling through pictures of people laughing together, celebrating milestones, traveling, building families, building careers, and you may wonder why your own life feels so quiet. You may miss someone you know you shouldn't return to. You may remember a friendship that ended without the explanation you wanted. You may think about the version of your life you once expected to have by now. That ache is real. But loneliness becomes dangerous when you interpret it as evidence that you are unwanted. It isn't. Sometimes loneliness is simply the emotional cost of changing your life before you've found the people who fit the new one. There is a difference between having no one and not yet having the right people around you. So don't run back to familiar places simply because they are familiar. A person can be surrounded by people and still feel completely unseen. Another person can spend an evening alone and feel deeply connected to who they are becoming. What matters is the quality of the relationship you have with yourself while you're waiting for better relationships with others. Use the quiet. Read something that challenges you. Take a walk without your phone in your hand. Write down what you've been afraid to admit. Learn a skill. Clean your space. Finish something you've been avoiding. Rest when you need to rest. Not because these actions magically solve everything, but because they remind your nervous system that your life is still moving. And when the difficult evening comes, don't make permanent decisions from temporary pain. Don't text the person who repeatedly broke your peace simply because tonight feels empty. Don't abandon your standards because you're afraid of being alone. Don't shrink yourself just to regain access to people who only appreciated you when you were easier to control. Give yourself time. Healthy connection doesn't require you to betray yourself to earn it. The right people won't need you to become smaller so they can feel comfortable beside you. And while you're waiting for those relationships, become the kind of person who can enjoy your own company. Not because you don't need anyone, because you no longer need someone else to prove that your existence has value. That distinction will prepare you for the next lesson, because once you stop fearing solitude, you become much harder to distract from your purpose. Purpose becomes clearer when noise becomes quieter. For a long time, you may have confused being busy with moving forward. Your days were full, your phone was constantly demanding attention, people always had opinions, and there was always another problem waiting for you. Yet at the end of the day, you still felt strangely empty. That's because activity and progress are not the same thing. You can spend years responding to everyone else's priorities and barely spend an hour building your own. Walking alone creates a different kind of space. You begin asking questions you couldn't hear before. What do I actually want? What kind of person do I want to become? What am I doing because it matters to me? And what am I doing because I'm afraid of disappointing someone? Those questions can be uncomfortable. They can also be liberating. Maybe you've spent years trying to prove that you're successful to people who never seem satisfied. Maybe you've chosen a career because it impressed your family. Maybe you've stayed in a relationship because starting over frightened you. Maybe you've kept chasing an old dream simply because you were afraid to admit that your definition of a meaningful life had changed. There comes a point when you have to stop performing a life and start living one. That doesn't mean abandoning responsibility. It means becoming intentional. Discipline is not about filling every minute with work. It's about deciding what deserves your energy and having the courage to protect that decision. Some days, building yourself will look like studying for an hour. Other days, it will look like turning off your phone and getting enough sleep. Sometimes it will mean sending the application. Sometimes it will mean declining an invitation. Sometimes it will mean starting over after realizing the path you chose no longer fits. Progress doesn't always look impressive from the outside. But if it brings you closer to the person you respect, it matters. And here's something worth remembering. You don't need to know the entire road before taking the next honest step. You only need enough clarity for today. One conversation, one decision, 1 hour of focused effort, one boundary, one act of courage, then tomorrow another. This is how a life changes. Not usually through one dramatic moment, but through hundreds of quiet choices that slowly become your character. So if you're walking alone right now, don't waste the season asking why nobody is beside you. Ask what you can build while you have the room to build it. Because the solitude you're experiencing may not be taking your future away. It may finally be giving you the attention your future requires. There is another lesson you learn when you walk alone. You discover what you can survive without becoming bitter. That may be one of the hardest forms of growth. Because disappointment can change a person. Someone breaks your trust, and suddenly you become suspicious of everyone. Someone leaves, and you decide you'll never need anyone again. Someone humiliates you, and you begin building an emotional wall so high that even good people can't reach you. You tell yourself you're protecting your heart. But sometimes protection quietly becomes isolation. Strength doesn't mean becoming incapable of being hurt. It means learning how to be hurt without allowing the wound to decide who you become. Think about the person who disappointed you most. Maybe you still replay the conversation. You remember what you should have said. You imagine how different everything might have been if they had treated you with more care. But there comes a point when replaying the past stops helping you understand it and starts keeping you emotionally tied to it. You don't have to approve of what happened. You don't have to forget. You don't even have to reconcile, but you can decide that their behavior will not become your personality. If someone lied to you, you don't have to become dishonest. If someone abandoned you, you don't have to abandon yourself. If someone treated you as though you were disposable, you don't have to spend the rest of your life trying to prove your worth. That's where dignity becomes stronger than resentment. You can say, "What happened hurt me, but it will not define the person I become." That is a different kind of freedom. And forgiveness, when it comes, doesn't always mean inviting someone back into your life. Sometimes forgiveness simply means you stop carrying the argument everywhere you go. You stop giving yesterday permission to ruin today. You take the lesson, you release the poison, you continue. If you're still carrying anger towards someone, ask yourself something gently. What would become possible in my life if I stopped allowing this person to occupy so much space in my mind? Don't demand an immediate answer. Sit with it. Healing isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the first morning you wake up and realize you haven't thought about what happened for several hours. Sometimes it's laughing again without feeling guilty. Sometimes it's realizing you can remember the past without wanting to return to it. That's how you know you're becoming free. And freedom gives you something even more valuable than distance from the past. It gives you room to choose your future with clear eyes. At some point, you have to stop waiting for the perfect moment to become the person you've been imagining. There will always be another reason to wait. You need more money, more confidence, more experience, more support, more certainty. But life rarely hands you certainty before asking you to move. Sometimes you have to begin while your hands are still shaking. This is where courage becomes practical. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that fear doesn't get to make every decision for you. You may be afraid to start over because you've already spent years building what you have. You may be afraid to leave because you don't know what comes next. You may be afraid to try because failing again would hurt. But staying exactly where you are also has a cost. And that cost can become invisible because you're paying it slowly. A year passes. Then another. You become more familiar with your excuses than with your possibilities. So begin where you are, not where you wish you were, not where someone else thinks you should be. Where you actually are. If you're exhausted, begin with rest. If you're confused, begin with learning. If you've lost confidence, begin with one promise you can keep. If you've been rejected, begin by refusing to turn rejection into a definition of your worth. If you've wasted time, begin by refusing to waste more time punishing yourself for it. You don't rebuild your life by demanding that everything change overnight. You rebuild it by making your next decision a little wiser than the last one. Then you repeat that decision and repeat it again. Eventually, those small choices become evidence. Evidence that you're dependable and evidence that you're capable of adapting. Evidence that you can survive uncertainty. Evidence that you don't need perfect conditions to make meaningful progress. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. One day, you'll look back at the season when you thought you were falling apart and realize you were actually learning how to stand differently. The silence taught you, the disappointment taught you, the solitude taught you, the discipline taught you. But none of those things were meant to make you hard. They were meant to make you honest. Honest about what you want, honest about what you deserve, honest about what you can no longer carry. So take the next step, not because you know exactly where it will lead. Take it because staying still has already taught you everything it can. And when you finally understand that, you stop asking whether you can walk alone. You start wondering how much of yourself you can finally build. One day, you may look back at this season of your life and realize something you couldn't see while you were living through it. You weren't being forgotten. You were being given the space to remember yourself. The people who walked away did not take your future with them. The doors that closed did not erase your worth. The seasons when nobody understood you did not make your dreams less meaningful. You were still there, and perhaps that's what matters most. You were still there on the mornings when getting out of bed felt harder than it should have. You were still there after the disappointment, after the rejection, after the conversation that changed everything, after realizing someone you trusted wasn't who you believed they were. You kept finding small reasons to continue. Maybe nobody noticed, but you did. And now you understand that walking alone was never about proving that you don't need people. Human beings need love, friendship, community, and connection. Walking alone means something different. It means you refuse to abandon yourself simply because someone else did. It means you can love people without losing yourself inside them. It means you can accept support without surrendering your direction. It means you can stand quietly when there is no applause and still know that what you're building matters. Your life doesn't have to look impressive to be meaningful. You don't have to become famous. You don't have to make everyone proud. You don't have to outrun everyone around you. You only have to become more honest, more disciplined, more courageous, and more at peace with the person you see when nobody else is watching. So take care of that person. Keep your promises to yourself. Protect your peace. Learn from your mistakes without living inside them. Let people leave without letting their departure become proof that you're unworthy. And when the road gets quiet again, don't automatically assume you've been left behind. Sometimes the quiet is where you finally hear your own direction. If this message spoke to you, subscribe to Focus with Maya for more meaningful motivation and life-changing wisdom every week. Like this video if you're choosing to build yourself, even when the process feels lonely. And share it with someone who may need to hear that they don't have to lose themselves just because they're walking through a difficult season. Keep walking, keep learning, keep becoming. You don't need the whole world beside you to take the next step. Sometimes all you need is the courage to stand beside yourself, and when you learn how to do that, you are no longer walking alone. You are walking with the person you have spent your whole life becoming.